So what I learned from my previous few videos is I need to work on my reading comprehension because I failed to skim the 300-page document quickly, so those videos had a few errors. Check the pinned comments on them. I think I caught most of them at this point, but I will want to narrow down my future discussions of the remaster. And for today's narrow discussion, I want to talk about a new skill feat that was added to the game. And this is a skill feat for thievery, and I think it's comparable to a lot of the athletics maneuvers. And so, effectively, it gives dexterity-oriented characters a support action that functions very similar to things like disarm and trip. Because, let me just go ahead and read out its text. Dirty Trick. It's a level 1 skill feat, and for one action with the attack and manipulate traits, so off to a bad start so far, has multi-attack penalty that will affect it, and it will tick up multi-attack penalty, and also it provokes reactive strikes. So keep that in mind. Requirements: you have a hand free and are within melee reach of an opponent. So that is a similar requirement to grapple, trip, all of the athletics actions, and those are also attack traded. So it's already looking pretty similar to a lot of those. And it says, you basically do something that confounds their mobility through an underhanded tactic. You make a thievery check against the target's reflex DC. On a critical success, you make them clumsy 1 until they use an interact action to clear the condition. On a success, it's like critical success, but the condition will end automatically after 1 round if they ignore it. And then a critical failure has you fall prone because you tried too hard. So, a lot of the athletics maneuvers, trips, grapples, etc., will help you make the enemy off guard. And off guard gives them a -2 to AC. Clumsy is a -1, but clumsy is a status penalty, and status penalty to AC is a lot harder to come by than sources of off guard. So, this action on the surface seems weaker, because you look at something like Trip, and Trip on a normal success makes it so they need to spend an action to get rid of it. And Trip also, it does things like hinder their movement a lot more, and etc, etc. But the fact that this is clumsy, not off guard, actually is a big deal, because that means this now stacks with sources of off guard. This helps the casters, and if the enemy is a dexterity-oriented attacker, it is going to make their attacks less accurate, although Trip would kind of do that as well. This action is still interesting, and it gives dexterity characters a different way to approach combat, particularly for boss fights. Because previously, as a dexterity character, if we're not talking about any of the other stats, you don't have a lot to do as a support in combat, because strength has the athletics maneuvers, and all the mental stats all have their thing they can do. Charisma has demoralize, bon mot. The intelligence, wisdom have the recall knowledge stuff. Wisdom also has battle medicine if you take skill feats for it. So basically, every stat other than dexterity had a way to play support in combat very easily. Now dexterity has a little bit of that supporting feel, which I think is healthy for the game. And I will now rate thievery a bit higher in future guides, because previously I thought that thievery was only really useful for picking locks and disarming traps, two things which only come up situationally, and you can still just brute force your way through with force open. Or, I don't know, beating the hazard to death with hammers, because hazards have an HP number, so they can be beat to death with hammers. So, I think that this is good for the game overall, because I think thievery wasn't in a great spot before, and now thievery is a bit better. So, that's good. And I should also mention that there is a swashbuckler subclass that is new, that makes use of this action, and let's go ahead and read what that one says. The Rascal swashbuckler. You aren't afraid to use underhanded tactics to get the edge over your opponents. You are trained in thievery and gain the Dirty Trick general feat. When you use Dirty Trick, the action gains the Bravado trait. So Dirty Trick will then give you Panache. It is still attack traded, and Gymnast, which is the athletics maneuver swashbuckler, gives you the option to grapple, reposition, shove, or trip to get panache. That means that the Gymnast can target Fortitude with grapple, reposition, or shove, and then still has an option to target reflex in trip. And all the swashbucklers can already target reflex to try and gain panache by tumbling through. So Rascal lets you target reflex with dirty trick, or target reflex with tumble through. It doesn't have that option target fort or will, so I think on first blush, it is weaker. And that's kinda it for what the subclass explicitly grants. There's also one more feat in Swashbuckler that calls upon the dirty trick, and it's called Dastardly Dash. It's one action, level 4 feat, with the Flourish trait, so it can only be used once per round. It says you dash past an opponent, confounding them with underhanded tactics. You get to stride up to half your speed, and you can attempt to trip or dirty trick against one opponent you pass within range of any point of your movement. So Dastardly Dash, it's probably better to trip with it and be a gymnast swashbuckler most of the time, but I think that dirty trick is an interesting option for the repertoire of a lot of parties, because those status penalties to AC are a bit harder to come by. I think dirty trick is a good addition to the game, even if it isn't going to push athletics out of its niche as the best skill for crowd controlling people. It is another option and lets dexterity characters get a slice of that pie in a way that athletics cannot. So, yeah, that's my review on the new skill feat that was added that I think will probably have the biggest impact on the meta. And I could have missed something, because again, my reading comprehension skill is trash. So, anyway, let me know what you think about this one. And with that, I'll see you in the next video.